For centuries, history has shown us one undeniable truth: global reserve currencies don't last forever. From the Portuguese Real to the Dutch guilder, the British pound to the US dollar, each currency has followed a similar trajectory, starting strong, dominating the world stage, but ultimately succumbing to the same fate. Today, the US dollar, once the pillar of global trade, finds itself in the midst of the same cycle that has destroyed every reserve currency before it. The question is, will we see the inevitable collapse of the dollar, or will we be able to avoid it? Understanding reserve currencies. To comprehend why the US dollar is headed toward decline, we must first understand what a reserve currency really is. A reserve currency is not just a strong currency, it's the one that other nations hold in their central bank reserves. It's the currency used to settle international trade and price commodities like oil, gold, and wheat. In short, when a currency is the reserve, it becomes the lifeblood of global commerce. Nations depend on it, and they have to produce goods just to earn it. This creates something called exorbitant privilege. As the reserve currency nation, you can print money to buy real goods. You can run trade deficits indefinitely because the rest of the world needs your currency to settle trade. This gives the reserve currency nation an economic advantage that no other country can replicate. However, the reserve currency's power is not permanent. It has a shelf life. The real question is, how long will the dollar hold its position before it starts following the same path as its predecessors? The 7 stages of a reserve currency's decline. Stage 1. Military dominance and control over trade routes. Every reserve currency begins with military supremacy and control over critical trade routes. In the 15th century, Portugal's mastery of oceanic navigation opened up trade routes to Asia, bypassing Ottoman-controlled land routes. Portugal controlled the Indian Ocean, the South China Sea, and the Atlantic, using military might to secure trade dominance. The Dutch, in the 1600s, followed a similar pattern with the Dutch East India Company, which had its own army and navy. The British Empire in the 19th century perfected this model, with the Royal Navy dominating the world's oceans, ensuring that global trade flowed through British-controlled choke points. The United States achieved similar dominance after World War II, securing military control over key trade routes like the Suez Canal, Panama Canal, and the Straits of Hormuz. Stage 2. Massive trade surpluses and the accumulation of global wealth. Once a nation controls trade routes, it begins accumulating wealth from around the world. This isn't through plundering, but rather through advantageous trade. Portugal, in the 1500s, bought valuable goods from Asia using gold and silver, then marked up European goods like textiles and weapons when they sold them back. The Dutch achieved similar success in the 1600s, dominating global trade by buying low in one market and selling high in another. The British Empire did this on a grand scale in the 1800s, exporting manufactured goods while importing raw materials at favorable prices. The United States achieved the largest trade surplus in history from 1945 to 1970, when it was the only major industrial power left standing after World War II. Stage 3. Reserve currency status formalized. This is the peak, the moment when a nation's currency is formally recognized as the global standard. For Portugal, it happened in the 1500s when the real became the primary currency for international transactions. The Dutch achieved this in the 1600s with the guilder, and Britain solidified the pound's status after the Congress of Vienna in 1815. For the United States, the Bretton Woods Agreement of 1944 formally established the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. The dollar officially became the world's reserve currency in 1944, and this formalization created a structure that propelled the US to unprecedented economic heights. But, as with every previous reserve currency, this is as good as it gets. Once a currency becomes the global standard, the seeds of its own destruction are planted. Stage 4. Deficit spending and living beyond means. Once a currency is the global reserve, the nation begins to stop producing wealth and starts consuming it. The Portuguese Empire, after dominating trade, began importing more than it exported, living off the wealth it had accumulated from trade. The Dutch and the British followed similar patterns, shifting from producing goods to consuming them, paying for imports with the wealth they had accumulated in previous stages. By the 1970s, the United States shifted from running trade surpluses to running massive trade deficits. The US became the world's largest importer, and by the 2000s, it was running the largest trade deficit in history. The US is now living beyond its means, importing far more than it exports, paying for it by printing dollars. This is the irreversible stage where the dollar starts its decline. Stage 5. Currency debasement and money printing. Once deficits become unsustainable, the nation resorts to debasing its currency. Portugal, in the 1500s, began to print more real coins without the silver to back them. This caused inflation and eroded the purchasing power of the currency. Similarly, the Dutch and British empires debased their currencies by printing money to cover their debts, which eventually led to the decline of the guilder and the pound. The United States entered Stage 5 in 2008, when the Federal Reserve began printing money to combat the financial crisis. From 2008 to 2014, the U.S. created $3.5 trillion through quantitative easing. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the money supply was further inflated, with $7 trillion printed between 2020 and 2022. The dollar has been debased on an unprecedented scale since 2008. The purchasing power of the dollar has eroded, with inflation hitting levels not seen in decades. As the Fed continues to print more money, the dollar's value continues to decline. Stage 6. Loss of confidence and search for alternatives. This is the breaking point. When trust in the reserve currency erodes, nations begin searching for alternatives. Portugal's real lost confidence in the 1570s. The Dutch guilder lost its credibility in the 1700s, and the British pound lost its standing after World War II. The US dollar is now entering this stage, with nations like China, Russia, and Brazil beginning to reduce their dollar reserves. The BRICS nations have even discussed creating their own currency as an alternative to the dollar. We are witnessing the early stages of Stage 6 right now. Countries are diversifying away from the dollar, with central banks shifting to gold and other currencies. Saudi Arabia, historically a staunch supporter of the petrodollar, began accepting yuan for oil sales to China in 2023. The world is looking for alternatives, and the dollar's dominance is weakening. Stage 7. Replacement and collapse. The final stage is when the dollar is replaced by another currency. This has happened before. The Portuguese real was replaced by the Spanish silver peso. The Dutch guilder was replaced by the British pound, and the British pound was replaced by the US dollar. The replacement currency will not be chosen by treaty, but will be adopted by the market. The US dollar is currently in Stage 6, searching for alternatives. While no single currency has yet taken the dollar's place, there are signs that the transition is already underway. If history is any guide, we may see the dollar replaced in the next decade or so. What this means for you. The decline of the dollar is not just an abstract concept for economists. It affects ordinary people's wealth. The collapse of previous reserve currencies has caused economic hardship for millions. Portugal's merchants saw their wealth evaporate with the collapse of the real. Dutch bankers lost everything when the guilder collapsed. British citizens saw their pensions and savings wiped out after the pound's devaluation. Protecting your wealth. If you're holding dollar-denominated assets, it's time to diversify. The dollar's purchasing power is in free fall, and as history shows, once the transition to a new reserve currency begins, it will be swift. Hold assets that preserve value across currencies: real estate, commodities, and businesses. Watch for signs that the dollar's dominance is waning: declining central bank reserves, increasing trade in other currencies, and rising gold prices. Understanding the 7 stages of reserve currency collapse isn't just academic, it's a survival strategy. The dollar is in stage 5, and the transition to stage 6 is already underway. Don't wait for stage 7 to arrive. Position yourself now to protect your wealth. In the end, it's not just about the fate of the dollar. It's about understanding the historical cycle that has played out time and time again. The pattern is clear, and the timeline is evident. Will you be ready for the shift, or will you find yourself caught in the collapse? The choice is yours. If this video has opened your eyes to the looming financial shifts and the inevitable decline of the US dollar, make sure you stay ahead of the curve. Don't forget to like this video if you found the insights valuable, and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth analyses of global economics, finance, and trends that are shaping our future.